Hi everyone, my name is Ma'am Shane.
And I am Sir Honest Mark.
Today we are going to discuss about the affective assessment tools.
At this moment, we have two objectives, which are the learners will able to,
Have constructed instrument for assessment affective learning.
and the second is the learners will able to discuss the methods in assessing affective domain.
There is a great need to balance the assessment of learning outcomes in learners by assessing all the domains associated with behavioral changes instead of assessing the cognitive achievement in the learner alone. Teaching and learning are complementary activities which are formally undertaken in the school context, informally at home, community, and the larger environment. In the school, teaching describes an action of the teachers that help pupils to acquire and retain knowledge, attitude, and skills. There was a study stating that learning is associated with behavioral changes in the cognitive or mental processes, affective or attitudes and feelings, and psychomotor or coordination between brain and muscles domains. But for now, we will only focus on assessing the learner's affective domain using the affective assessment tools that we will tackle later. The teachers plays a very important role during teaching and learning session, deciding on what, how, and when to teach. In addition, the educators take stock of the teaching learning process by providing answers to fundamental questions. How well are students learning? And how effective is the teaching?
Now, let us define affective assessment. What is affective assessment? It involves the measurement of the personal aspects that impact learning such as students' perceptions, viewpoints, feelings, attitudes, and etc. that are connected to the affective side of learning. However, it is important to recognize that these areas are also influenced by thinking factors along with the emotional connections that go with them. Dr. Pofang has a bias towards affective measures. He argues that affective measures are equally, if not more, important as cognitive measures, whereas cognitive assessments measure what students can do, while affective assessments measure what students will do in the future. When teachers measure children's attitudes toward democratic process, we gain insights into how will they likely act toward the democratic system when they grow up, knowing that this is equally important, if not more than, to knowing whether the students can name and describe the three branches of government in the Philippines.
Now let's proceed to the tools for effective assessment. There are so many effects, attitude, and values that could be assessed. The educators don't have sufficient time to do such assessment in the classroom, but they can sometimes use very simple psychological techniques to assess the students' most important effects. Dr. James Popham suggests some good tools which are interviews with students, self-report assessment or essays, and Likert inventories. Once it is decided that it is desirable for effective outcomes to be measured, the next step is the teacher devise situation and techniques which will make it possible for learners to demonstrate the desired affective behavior he intends to measure. So, affective characteristics are evaluated primarily through observation or using checklists or rating scales and self-report or interviewing and written questionnaire. Three common approaches for measuring affective behavior are what a person says about himself or what we call self-reporting inventory. Another one is what others says about the person or sociometric methods and what the person does in a particular kind of situation or observational technique.
Moving on to the definition of affective assessment tools, the affective domain encompasses behaviors in terms of attitudes, beliefs, and feelings. Sets of attitudes, beliefs, and feelings comprise one's value. There are various assessment tools that can be used to measure affect. First tool is checklist. Dr. K. Berg, a PhD from Georgia State University, said that checklist is one of the effective assessment strategies to monitor student skills, behaviors, or disposition of individual or group of students. Checklist contains criteria that focus on the intended outcome or target. Checklists help learners in arranging the tasks assigned to them into logically sequenced steps that will lead to a successful completion of the task. Checklists provide formative assessment of students' learning and help teachers monitor if students are on track with the desired outcomes. For the teachers, a criteria checklist can be used for formative assessments by giving emphasis on specific behaviors, thinking skills, social skills, writing skills, speaking skills, athletic skills, or whatever outcomes are likely to be measured and monitored. Checklists can be used for individual or group cases. In planning for criteria that will be used in checklists, the criteria must be aligned with the outcomes that need to be observed and measured. Generally, criterion is defined as a standard that serves as reference for judgment or decision. Poham explains that when teachers have criteria, the main emphasis is to use these criteria in making judgment regarding the adequacy of student responses, and the criteria will influence the way the response is scored. In making checklists, the educators must put adjectives as many as they want. Here is an example of checklist. The students will put a check mark as an indicator of what they feel regarding in your class. The Filipino subject is either exciting, boring, informative, difficult, easy, or interesting.
So the next is rating scales. According to Nitko and Brockhart, rating scales can be used for teaching purposes and assessment. Rating scales help students understand the learning target or outcome and to focus student attention to performance. Completed rating scales give specific feedback to students as far as their strengths and weaknesses with respect to the target to which they are measured. Example of rating scales is the attitude towards Filipino subject. So the student will put the score in the column for each of the statement as it applies to you. Use 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 the highest possible score. So let's move on to the types of rating scales. The most commonly used types of rating scales are numerical rating scales. A numerical rating scales translate the judgments of quality or degree into numbers to increase the objectivity and consistency of results. From numerical rating scales, a short verbal description of the quality level of each number may be provided. Another one is the descriptive graphic rating scales. A better format for rating is this descriptive graphic rating scales that replaces ambiguous single word with short behavioral description of the various points along the scales.
Next is semantic differential scale. Another common approach to measuring affective traits is to use variation of semantic differential. These scales use adjective pairs that provide anchors for feelings or beliefs that are opposite in direction and intensity. Students would place a check between each pair of adjectives that describes positive or negative aspects of traits. Semantic differential scale, like other selected response format, is that it makes it easier to assure anonymity. Anonymity is important when the traits are more personal, such as values and self-concept. It is also an efficient way of collecting information. Though this may be an efficient way, but take note that it is not good to ask too many questions. It is important to carefully select those traits that are concerned or included in the defined affective targets or outcomes. It is also good point to have open-ended items such as comments or suggestions. Another simple and widely used self-report method in assessing affect is the use of Likert scale, wherein a list of clearly favorable and unfavorable attitude statements are provided. The students are asked to respond to each of the statements. Likert scale uses the 5-point scale: strongly agree, agree, undecided, disagree, and strongly disagree. The scoring of a Likert scale is based on assigning weights from 1 to 5 to each position of scale. In using attitude scale, it is best to ask for anonymous responses. In interpreting the results, it is important to keep in mind that these are verbal expressions, feelings, and opinions that individuals are willing to report.
So below are the steps in constructing Likert scale instrument. The first one is write a series of statements expressing positive and negative opinions toward attitude objects. The next one is select the best statements expressing positive and negative opinions and edit as necessary. Next is list the statements combining the positive and negative and put the letters of the 5-point scale to the left of each statement for easy marking. The next one is add the directions, indicating how to mark the answers and include a key at the top of the page if letters are used for each statement. The last one is some prefer to drop the undecided category so that respondents will be forced to indicate agreement or disagreement. Next is self-report. This is the most common measurement tool in the affective domain. It essentially requires an individual to provide an account of his attitude or feelings toward a concept or idea or people. Self-reports are also sometimes called written reflections. In using this measurement tool, the teacher requires the student to write their thoughts on a subject matter, like why I like or dislike Filipino subject. The teacher ensures that the students write something which would demonstrate the various levels of the taxonomy, or from receiving up to characterization.
And the last one is interview. An interview is a written guide for asking a person questions in order to collect information from him or her about him or herself, or a system he or she is used to. The use of interview schedule or interview to collect evaluation information usually goes beyond a list of simple questions which may be answered by mere yes or no. A good interview should also be capable of eliciting elaborate responses from the learner. An interview may or may not be structured, controlled, or standardized with respect to both the questions and the possible answers. When it is structured, controlled, or standardized, it provides an opportunity to obtain the same responses from the respondents. It is, however, difficult to adapt this type of interview to the level of each respondent because of its lack of flexibility. This may, however, make the interviewer to miss some vital information. It may also pose a problem since the procedure for collecting the information varies from one respondent to another. The use of interview to collect evaluation information has some merits. They include, it could be used to collect information from kindergarten and lower basic pupils who cannot read and write properly. It gives the teacher the opportunity to have direct interaction with the respondents. It would, however, be mentioned that the use of interview in collecting evaluation information is prone to subjectivity, and the analysis of such information is always very difficult and time-consuming. We have provided examples for numerical rating scales, descriptive graphic rating scales, semantic rating scales, Likert scales, self-report, and interview. And now, let's have a recap for affective assessment tools. What is affective assessment? It involves the measurement of the personal aspects that impact learning, such as students' perceptions, viewpoints, feelings, attitudes, and etc. that are connected to the affected side of learning. James Popham suggests some good tools, which are interviews with students, self-report assessment or essay, and Likert inventories. There are 4 types of affective assessment tools, which are checklist, rating scales, self-report, and interview. Under rating scales, there are 4 types of it, which are Likert scales, semantic differential scales, numerical scales, and descriptive graphic rating scales. There are 5 types in constructing Likert scales, which are: first, write a series of statements expressing positive and negative opinions toward attitude object. Second, select the best statements expressing positive and negative opinions and edit as necessary. Third, list the statements combining the positive and negative and put the letters of the 5-point scale to the left of each statement for easy marking. Fourth, add the directions indicating how to mark the answer and include a key at the top of the page if letters are used for each statement. And the last step is, some may prefer to drop the undecided category so that respondents will be forced to indicate agreement or disagreement. And that's all for today, and we hope that you learned a lot from us.
This is Ma'am Shane,
And this is Sir Alnez.
and thank you for watching!